You can stop calling yourself his grandmother. That's what my daughter-in-law said first, over the hum of my own refrigerator. She didn't even take off her coat. The padded envelope lay on my table beside a chipped mug with yesterday's tea ring, the mug Mark made in 8th grade when his hands were still clumsy and sweet. Now he watched the floor. Results came in, she said, sliding out the paper like a bill she didn't want to pay. No match between you and Eli. It's conclusive. Conclusive. The word clanged against the magnets on the fridge, the calendar of the garden club I don't attend anymore, a takeout coupon, a photo of Eli at the county fair last summer with cotton candy blue on his tongue. My hands went cold. I didn't ask to see the paper. I didn't want to learn a new language made of numbers that the heart cannot read. You said you'd help with the camp fees, she added, softer. But I thought you should know first. It's not, well, it's not your responsibility. She set the paper down, and a draft from the back door made it flutter. Something else fluttered inside me, but I kept my voice neat, like folded towels. Tea? I asked. I can make tea. No, she said. We're late. And then, as if she hadn't already unstitched me, she added, Please don't tell Eli anything. It'll only confuse him. When the door latched and the kitchen settled back into its ordinary sounds, I picked up the paper. The letters slanted slightly where the printer had misfed. My name. His name. Percentages and ranges. I folded the page along a seam that lined up our names and slid it under the mug to keep the page from curling, as though weight could hold truth still. After they left, I stood a long time looking at the photo magneted to the freezer. Me, sunburned, the summer of '78, standing beneath the faded banner at the county fair. A man beside me held a baby, laughing, a crescent mark tucked under the baby's right ear like a smudge of the moon on water. The man was my husband. The baby was not mine. The little half-moon waited in the silver light of the fridge, and I felt it tug like a quiet tide. I took the photo down, pressed it between my palms until the edges bit a little. There are stories ink doesn't know how to measure. I could hear the cheap carnival organ from that night, faint as a secret. I slipped the photo into my sweater pocket. The mug left a ring on the lab report like a small eclipse. Something had shifted. I didn't cry. I turned off the kitchen light and let the refrigerator whisper to itself in the dark. If love was a match you could strike, why did I still see Eli's face flicker in the dark like a pilot light that never goes out? I woke before the buses started their run down Linden Avenue. Dawn poured into the little yellow room where I keep my chair and the Afghan my mother crocheted out of leftover skeins. In this house, nothing matches, and somehow everything does. The photo from the fridge lay on the end table, smoothing itself under the weight of a church cookbook. I remembered the night we took it. The fairground smelled like frying dough and damp hay. Eddie had won a stuffed tiger for some neighbour girl by knocking milk bottles into a staggered spill. He was good at throwing. He was good at looking like a hero. When May, her name surfaces like a bobber after a tug, pressed the baby into his arms so she could light a cigarette with shaky hands, he laughed and bounced the child, and that little crescent-shaped birthmark flashed when the baby turned. Eli has that same shy sandbar of a mark beneath his right ear. It hides until he tilts his head to listen, the way he does when I read him the recipe cards with my finger tracing the flowery words. The lab paper said I didn't match him. The photo said something else. That blood remembers in curves and shadows, not just fractions. I made oatmeal, the cheap kind, and ate it standing by the sink because the chair near the table still held the indent of my daughter-in-law's coat. I looked at the envelope on the counter, and thought of the other envelopes in my life: bills, sympathy cards, a letter from the funeral home the year Eddie died that smelled faintly of lavender, as if the paper itself had gone to church. We had only one son, Mark, born on a sticky July afternoon in '78, after 12 hours of work I did with my jaw set and no one in the room saying my name. The nurse kept calling me Mum, as if that would speed anything up. When they finally laid him on my chest, there was no crescent mark under his ear. There was a squeal and a flail and a red face and the start of a life I thought I knew by heart. I rinsed the bowl and set it in the rack to dry, listening to the drip. I could call the number on the lab paper and ask for an explanation, demand a human voice at the other end. But I also knew what would come: definitions and ranges, percentages, and the gentle, reasonable tone people use when they are telling you the floor is the ceiling now. Instead, I took the '78 photo and a rubber band and strapped them to the cover of an album I hadn't opened in years. The album smelled like dust that had once been perfume. On the first page, a picture of Eddie leaning on the fender of our Chevy, grease under his nails, sun on his neck. He had a way of looking at my camera like he was starting a story and letting me decide the ending. I touched his grin with a fingertip. That summer had edges. In the margin next to the fair photo, I had written, in my neat grocery list, hand, County Fair. Eddie, May from 2 streets over. Baby with the moon. I had forgotten the detail until I saw my own handwriting, and then it was like walking into a room you used to visit every day and finding the furniture still waiting. I closed the album. The decision was as small and sharp as a sewing needle. I would find May, or a record of her. I would ask a few questions that didn't need laboratory ink to answer. The morning buses sighed past, picking up children who would not learn my name. That was all right. I buttoned my sweater against the small draft that comes under the back door in March and put the album in my tote. There are people who think old women have nothing left to look for. They forget how light a tote bag can be when it's carrying your own past. The senior centre on Cherry Street opens early, like a church for those of us who pray by reading signs. The staff knows me by the way I hold the stapler, two-handed, careful. I asked Wendy, hair like a fresh-washed paintbrush, for access to the public computer so I could print something. "What are we hunting?" she asked, friendly. "Old addresses," I said. "A woman named May, late 70s, lived near Linden and 3rd. She raised an eyebrow. "You want the Paper City directory? Got one in the storage closet. Smells like an attic." She smiled, and I liked her for not asking why. We found the directory with the cracked spine and the pages that loved to sigh when you turn them. Linden Avenue, then the cross streets, May, 3 of them, but only one with the last name Baker, and I could see her little ranch house in my mind, paint chalking off under sun and age. "Want me to call?" Wendy offered, "if she's still around." "No," I said, surprised at how fast I answered. "I'll walk by later." On the way out, I passed the bulletin board. A flyer for a Family DNA 101 talk later in the month had a smiling stock photo family on it, their matching teeth almost humming with agreement. I looked away so fast, the edge of the flyer caught my sweater and peeled a little thread. I tucked it back, small as a secret. At the printer, a man with a veteran's cap and a tremor in his hand was trying to make the machine produce copies of his discharge papers. Paper stuck. Heat and plastic smell. "Machines don't like to be old either," he muttered, and I couldn't help it. I laughed, soft and honest. He looked up and smiled back, the victory of strangers. I printed a map, like I was someone traveling to new places. I also printed the photo of me with Eli, the one from the fair last summer, because the lab paper might be what it is. But a kitchen magnet has its own stubborn truth. I slid both into the tote with the 1978 album. The tote felt heavier now, like remembering costs something, which of course it does. Outside, March light lay thin across the sidewalk. My body is soft in the places where it fought so hard once, and my knees announce each curb. I walked anyway, past the diner where the booths crackle when you sit, past the laundromat's steam ghosting the windows, past the lottery billboard that promises and promises. When I reached Linden and Third, I stopped. May's house was peeled almost clean. A new mailbox, crooked. A wooden swing in the yard with nobody brave enough to sit. The front window held a lace curtain that seemed to be holding its breath. I climbed the 3 shallow steps and stood there with my tote like a substitute teacher waiting for a class that won't come. The door opened before I could knock. Not May. A woman younger than me, maybe 50, with the careful face of someone who has answered too many doors to strangers. Yes. I'm looking for May Baker, I said. I used to know her. In the 70s. The woman softened, then smoothed the softness away. My mother, she said. She passed 2 summers ago. Something inside me sat down, but the woman didn't close the door. I'm Lena, she said. Did you want to come in for a minute? It's chilly. I shook my head. I don't want to impose. The word sounded like it had been waiting on my tongue. I just had a question about a photo. From the fair, 1978. Her mouth made a shape I recognize in mirrors. A sudden breath that wants to be a word. My brother was born that year, she said. Tom. People always brought up that fair. A bird landed on the swing chain and rode it, light, without moving the seat. I could feel the microclimax of a life folding itself toward me like a paper crane. I think I have something of yours, I said. Or mine. Or both. Lena's eyes brightened with a kind of cautious hope people don't show unless they're ready to be gentle with themselves. She opened the door wider. Come in, she said, and I did. The Baker living room smelled like lemon oil and years. A TV on a low stand kept its own silence. On the mantel, a parade of frames stood stiff as soldiers, baptisms, graduations, a Christmas with a dog in a sweater. There it was. That ear again, the right one, with the faint half-moon under it, appearing and disappearing as light shifted behind the lace curtain. That's Tom, Lena said, gesturing to a photo of a boy about 8, gap-toothed and grinning. He hated that mark when he was little, said it made him look like the moon was listening to him. I sat on the edge of a sofa that didn't want to be sat on. I took the 78 album out and slid it to the page with the fair photo. Eddie, May, the baby. My handwriting. Baby with the moon. Lena touched the corner of the page like it had heat. That's my mother, she whispered. She talked about a man who was kind, who held Tom when she was so tired she could sleep standing up. She didn't say his name, I asked, the air in my throat suddenly thin. She wouldn't, Lena said it would only make trouble. It already had, of course. Things spread like spilled sugar, and then you find it months later, still under the salt shaker, sweet where it shouldn't be. My husband's name was Eddie, I said. He died in 2002. He could never pass a crying baby without taking it. It was his talent and his flaw. Lena nodded like someone who has met flaws she loved. Tom moved to Cincinnati. she said. 2 boys, big now. One of them, Eli, almost 11, he has, well, you can see it? She touched the photo's margin where the moon mark lived. My hands found the print from last summer on my kitchen fridge and slid it across. Eli with cotton candy on his tongue, that right ear turned, the faint crescent peeking like a secret. Lena's eyes grew wet and then steady. You know him, she said. I know him as my grandson, I answered. It came out quiet, with a strength I forgot I still carry. Even if a lab says otherwise. Lena put her fingers to her mouth and looked at me over them. There's another story, she breathed. That's what I came for, I said. Another story. The room felt warmer. I looked at the mantel again. Tiny, stand-up versions of a life, all of them insisting, this was real. This mattered. I can call Tom, she said. Not yet, I said. Not until I figure out how to explain love to a chart. We both smiled at that. The smile of women who have had to explain themselves to less forgiving things. On my way out, I saw a woven throw folded on a chair, its fringe combed. Someone had been careful with it, even though nobody is careful with what they plan to throw away. I thought about my daughter-in-law's words, you can stop calling yourself his grandmother, and I knew I would not. I would not stop. Outside, the sky had brightened to that flat Ohio blue that promises nothing and therefore cannot lie. I tucked the album into my tote and felt the weight settle in a way that made my shoulders stand up straighter. This was mine to carry, not a burden, a spine. The next day, Mark arrived without calling, the way children do when the house still feels like theirs. He sat at my kitchen table and pushed the lab paper out again, like a referee with a flag. The afternoon light caught the line of worry between his eyebrows, the one he got from me. Mom, it's better to be clear, he said. For everyone. For whom? I asked. For Eli, for us. He rubbed his jaw, avoiding my eyes. And financial stuff. We were thinking maybe it's time to do a power of attorney. Simplify things. The house? Bills? He swallowed the rest. And my chair, I said, nodding toward the yellow room. Will the power of attorney include my right to sit where I like and think what I like? He closed his eyes. Please don't make this harder. The lab paper already did that, I said. What you're asking is different. He leaned forward, hands clasped. We found a place in Kettering with a shuttle bus and activities. They have a room available next month. It would be simpler. For you, I said gently. For everybody, he corrected, and there it was, the arithmetic where my life is a fraction to be reduced. Do they let you bring your own chairs? I asked. He blinked. I guess. Why? Because I like mine, I said. It fits me. He exhaled and looked around the kitchen as if searching for an ally among the 4 sides and the stove. Look, we got the test to make sure we're honest with Eli about who his family is. You got the test because someone told you a truth is only true when it prints out, I said, and surprised even myself. But Eli knows my laugh. He knows how I cut peaches. He knows my drawer where the gum lives. Does the lab know those things? You're being sentimental, he said quietly, which is a word men use when they want you to sit down inside your own mouth. Maybe, I said. But I'm also old enough to know when a chair is worth what it costs. He stared at me, something changing in his face like a shadow crossing a field. We'll talk later, he said, and stood. We will, I agreed. I didn't tell him that I had an appointment at Legal Aid tomorrow morning. Quiet things can still be acts of rebellion. I watched him leave with a heaviness that was not sadness yet, but its cousin. When the door clicked, I got my coat and went to the bus stop. The bus driver nodded, and I took the second backward-facing seat because I like to see where I've been. The senior centre's legal clinic smelled like pencils. A woman with silver hair and a cardigan that had stories in its stitches sat across from me and looked in my eyes as if they were the laws we needed to read. "You want to keep your house?" she asked. "I want to keep my chair," I said, "and the house that holds it, and my right to decide who is family." She smiled like a friend. "Those are all legal realities," she said. "Let's start with the first two." I signed papers with a pen that made a rich, confident line. At the end, my name sat on the page like it had been waiting for me to come home. I slipped a copy into my tote, next to the album, next to the photo of Eli's blue tongue. Back on the bus, the sky had turned the pale colour of dishes that have been washed and rinsed and left to air dry. My hands smelled like ink and hope. It was enough for one day. I didn't plan to call Tom, but sometimes life makes a sound in your pocket until you pick up. Lena had given me his number on a narrow slip of paper that felt like it had come out of a fortune cookie. "Hello?" His voice was lower than Eddie's, but there was a certain ease at the vowels, the way some men talk like they're leaning on a fence. "Tom," I said. "My name is Nora. I was a neighbour of your mother's once." There was a pause. Spoons click like that when you set them down too carefully. "Lena told me you stopped by," he said. "She said you had a photo." "I have two," I said. "One from 1978, one from last summer. I think they rhyme." He laughed, surprised. "That's a good way to put it." "Do you know a boy named Eli?" I asked. The room got a little smaller around the question, as rooms do when you ask for something you're not sure you should have. "I do," he said. "He's my grandson." I closed my eyes. The refrigerator cycled on. "Mine too," I whispered. He didn't fill the silence with apologies or theories. "My son, Eli's father, doesn't like questions," he said finally. "He took a test once and then wouldn't talk about it. Said it was a mistake. People get scared of paper." I nodded, as if he could see me. "So do I," I said. "Only for different reasons." "Can I meet you?" he asked. "Not to make trouble, just to put eyes on this thing that's bumping around in our families. There is bravery in making appointments." We met at a diner with vinyl seats that breathe out when you sit. I wore my blue sweater because it makes me feel like I haven't made every mistake in my life twice. Tom walked in with an old baseball cap and shoulders that had carried work. We ordered coffee we both pretended to like. I slid the photos across. He studied the one from the fair first. Eddie's grin, the baby with the little mark. "My mother," he said, and then, so quietly it almost didn't come out, "and me." He looked a long time at the photo of Eli. "That boy loves funnel cake," he said, and I smiled because I knew that already. We didn't say DNA, we said resemblance, we said ear, we said summer. He told me how his father had been around but not in, which is the kind of sentence that makes a boy into a man who chooses carefully. I told him how Eddie had been in but also away, which is the kind of sentence that turns a wife into a slow, patient keeper of her own breath. When we stood to leave, the waitress slid the check at him by habit. He slid it to me, amused. I slid it back to the middle. "We can each pay for our own coffee," I said. "We're new to each other, after all." He laughed, and the sound was as familiar as a back porch. Agreed, he said. Outside, the sky was a dull nickel. We stood by the plate glass window and looked at our reflections standing almost together. He should know you, Tom said. Paper or no paper? I'll take whatever is offered, I said. And I won't call it less than it is. Good, he said. Me either. We shook hands like old neighbours who had finally admitted the back fences were always the same fence. The next family gathering was Eli's early birthday, because weekends are easier to corral than the calendar. There was a cake shaped like a basketball because that's what boys are supposed to love, though Eli prefers sketchbooks and climbing trees. I set my gift, a tin of coloured pencils and a pad of heavy paper, beside the gaudy cake, and my daughter-in-law shifted it an inch as if that would help. She didn't make an announcement, but the lab paper had been passed around like a rumour. I could feel it in the way the women nodded too carefully at me, the way the men avoided my eyes. Some truths arrive without knocking, others shiver in the coat closet and then show up in the way someone cuts a slice of cake. Eli barreled into me, head against my middle. Grandma, he said into my sweater. The word landed like a bird that had been circling a long time for somewhere to rest. Hey, Munir, I whispered. It was our secret name. He tilted his head, and the little crescent flashed, moth-pale in the living room light. My daughter-in-law saw and flinched. Her mouth vowed something to itself. After presents, he said, "Thank you," to everyone, because he is the kind of child who smells where gratitude lives. We all moved toward the kitchen, where the new countertops glared. I carried the heavy cake plate like an offering. My daughter-in-law put her hand over mine on the glass and said, "Lo, please don't confuse him. Don't use names that aren't right." I set the plate down. He knows who I am, I said, whatever you prefer to call it. It's not about preference, she said. It's about facts. Facts are easy, I said. It's truth that takes work. I wasn't proud of that line even as it sat there between us, cool as the frosted cake. Mark stood nearby with the paper plates. He kept looking at the drawer where the forks were, as if cutlery could solve any of this. "Mum," he said, not unkindly, "let's just keep things simple today." Simple? I almost laughed. "Of course," I said, and cut the cake exactly in half, thinking of how, when he was little, I used to use the "you cut, I choose" rule, so he wouldn't fight with his cousin. Some parts of a life don't stop being useful. Later, when the guests had thinned and the house smelled like sugar and plastic cups, Eli brought me his sketchbook and showed me a drawing of the fair. Ferris wheel, ferules. He had gotten the spokes right. Under the wheel, a person holding a baby with a notch of moon under its ear. He had given the person a blue sweater I recognized. "Is that me?" I asked. "Uh-huh," he said. "People change. Some things don't." I put my finger to the paper, careful not to smudge. "That's true," I said. The microclimax of the day was a boy's quiet drawing, and it lifted the roof of my chest just enough for light to move in. That night, I did something that would be dramatic if I were younger, but at my age, it's simply called deciding. I put 3 dresses, my medicine, my pay-as-you-go phone, and the photo album into a rolling suitcase. I took the checkbook and left the house keys on the ring shaped like a rooster. Then I called the motel at the edge of town with the yellow sign that looks friendly until you see it up close. "Weekly rate?" I asked. The woman told me, and it was less than a mistake, more than a good idea. The room had a bed that remembered other bodies, and a window that looked onto a parking lot where trucks came home late. I put the album on the nightstand and sat on the bedspread that tried to be cheerful with its blue flowers. The motel soap made my hands smell like a decision. I slept with the light on, because there are nights when darkness feels like more truth than you can lift. In the morning, I took the bus to the bank. The teller was new, still smoothing the corners of her professionalism. I moved some money. I put other money where it could be watched by someone who wasn't a son with worry in his mouth. The manager brought me into the small glass room where they pretend things are private and asked if I was sure. I am, I said. I want the house assessed for sale. Quietly. You've had it a long time, she said, as if the house were a pet I should keep until it lays down for good. I've held it, I said, and now I will let it hold someone else. She nodded. She understood something that wasn't the house. Back at the motel, I made tea in the little coffee maker and drank it from a styrofoam cup that bent under the heat. My neighbour was a construction worker with kind eyes who watched TV too loud. He rapped gently on the wall and turned it down when I tapped back. And that was our whole friendship. I called legal aid. I'm selling the house, I said. I want to do it before we talk about Kettering shuttles and activities. Understood, the woman with the cardigan said. We'll update your documents. We'll add language that clarifies the sale is voluntary. Everything I do now is, I said. It sounded almost like bravery, and it tasted like motel soap, faint and clean. When you sell a house after 46 years, people look at you the way they do when you take off your wedding ring in public, as if you must be brave or broken. The real estate woman brought a folder with tabs and a pen with her company name on it. I signed where the coloured flags fluttered. The roof over a life is not the same as a life, but you do feel taller or shorter as lawyers move papers around you. I called Mark from the motel. There's an open house Sunday, I said. My voice tried to be short and therefore less painful. Please take any of your things you want before then. There was no silence on his end. I could hear Eli in the background laughing at something. Mum, what are you doing? He asked, shocked into using the old word instead of Ma or my name. I'm choosing, I said. You can visit me where I live, or you can visit my old rooms without me. Either way, it will be honest. You're punishing us, he said, and the us was another kind of paperwork. I'm not, I said, surprised at how sure I was. I'm choosing not to wait in a house for someone to tell me who I am. That's all. He couldn't answer that cleanly. Where will you go? He asked finally. I'm not sure yet, I said. But my chair is a person, and she can travel. We both laughed, unwilling and then willing. After the call, the motel clerk knocked and handed me a flowered envelope. Someone left this at the desk, she said, eyeing the careful cursive on the front. Inside was a photo I had never seen. May in her kitchen with the yellow curtains I remembered dimly, holding baby Tom, someone's careful hand having written on the back. August 1978. Our eclipse. There is a way women speak to each other across years without ever meeting in the middle. I pressed the photo to my chest. The motel TV carried the news like a noisy river. I turned it off and listened to the air conditioner shift from one tone to another, the way a choir wanders into harmony. I guessed Lena had found the picture and left it for me, or Tom, or a ghost with good penmanship. Either way, it felt like a permission slip I hadn't known to ask for. I put the photo into the album in a slot next to the fair. I sat a long time with both in my lap and let the truth uncrease itself. At some point I realized I was hungry. I walked to the diner and ordered meatloaf because it tastes like mother's. The waitress poured me coffee and called me honey in a tone that could rewire a life. When the bill came, I put down more than it cost. Sometimes we tip the universe just in case. I met Tom again by the river, where water has done the same job so long it stopped complaining. We took a bench and watched the slowness together. He held a paper bag from the hardware store, and I held nothing, which was unusual for me. My son doesn't want to talk about who his father is, he said. He says what matters is who showed up. Some days that's a relief. Some days it feels like a door I can't open. You can sit in front of a door and still be a father, I said. You can lean your back against it. Be there when it opens. He grinned, sudden and younger. You talk like a person who's found a few ways to be. I talk like a woman who has watched a lot of doors and still has her chair, I said, and he chuckled. We watched a family on the far bank pose for a photo, the father trying to get the youngest to stop picking up rocks. The mother laughed like she believed in patience. A dog barked at things that didn't need barking at. I brought you something, Tom said, holding up the hardware bag. Inside was nothing but a new picture frame, simple wood, the kind you buy when you trust the photo to do the work. Thought you might have something worth keeping safe. I do, I said. 2 somethings. We traded addresses. He wrote his like he was used to writing down things that might be used against him. I wrote mine like my hand had learned a new respect. A leaf landed on the water and took the long way. Perfect, I thought. Perfect. Before we left, he said, Eli is at the art store with his dad. If you want to, no pressure. Bump into them sometime. I'll leave that door a little open, I said. We stood. My knees argued. I asked them nicely to hush. Back at the motel, I took the frame out of the bag and put the fair photo in it, then wedged the new picture beside it in the album where a child's face watched my old life as if it had been looking for me. I made bread in the motel room because it was the most defiant thing I could think of. Yeast bubbled in a paper cup like a small, brave science. Flour dusted the nightstand. The dough rose against the plastic wrap, and I punched it down the way I used to when Mark was small and thought all kitchen things were magic. While the loaf baked in the tiny oven, I wrote a letter. Not a long one. Just enough to say, I love you, Eli. Not because of what prints out, but because you are the boy who eats the crusts first and leaves the middle for last. Because you ask which trees make a sound like rain when there isn't any. Because you tilt your head when you listen, and the moon under your ear keeps me company. I didn't say anything about the lab. Children deserve fewer charts and more afternoons. I tucked the letter into a library book I'd borrowed for him, a book about birds that nest under bridges. The book smelled like 100 hands. I left the package on their porch early, when the newspaper man still misses the driveway. Back at the motel, a voice message blinked on my little phone. My daughter-in-law's voice, careful. I saw the listing, she said. If this is about punishing, please don't. We thought we were helping. You can't tell people how to hold their own hands. I'm not punishing, I said into the voicemail, keeping my tone as steady as a table. I'm choosing the kind of loneliness that doesn't call itself care. I baked the bread too dark. That's the thing about motel ovens. They don't remember what you like. I ate the slices with butter packets and felt almost rich. Mid-chew, my phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. A photo of Eli holding the bird book, grinning. The message, he says thank you. He wants to show you his drawing of the bridge. I stared so long, the bread cooled on the plate. I typed, "Tell him the bridge can hold us both." Then I set the phone down and cried without moving my face, which is a skill I learned the year Eddie didn't come home on my birthday. On Sunday, the real estate woman propped the door to my old house open with a wedge shaped like an apple. Strangers walked through, speaking the language of cabinets and square footage, and I sat on the porch wrapped in my blue sweater and watched them try on my hallways with their eyes. A couple with a baby counted outlets. A man with a beard crouched to inspect a floor vent like he was considering how best to kneel in this life. A woman in a red coat asked if the neighborhood was quiet, as if you can hear a future. I said it was. I didn't say the quiet had been mine. Toward the end, Mark arrived with a box and gathered a few things: his high school trophy, a watch Eddie left him, a photo from a fishing trip where the fish were a rumor. He found me on the porch and stood there with a look I remember from when he was 12 and had accidentally broken his friend's window with a baseball. "I thought I had more time," he said. "We always do," I answered. "I'm not mad," he said, and then grimaced. "That sounds like I'm forgiving you. I don't mean it like that." "I know," I said. "I'm not asking for absolution, just space." He sat on the step below mine, looking at the sidewalk I had swept, even on days when nobody was coming. "Eli loves you," he said. "I love him," I said. He nodded. "We got that test because I thought it would be easier if the paper could tell me where to put my heart." He let out a breath, like he'd been hiding it for a year. "But it turns out my heart doesn't read the same language." "Mine either," I said. He put his head in his hands for a moment, then looked up as if the sky had spoken. "Keep your chair," he said. "I'll bring it to wherever you land. No shuttles, no activities unless you pick them." I smiled a little. "I like bingo when the prize is a ham." "I know," he said. We both laughed until we didn't. As the last couple left, the woman in the red coat turned and said to me, "It's a good house. It feels kindly." "It is," I said. "Treat it like it taught you manners." She smiled, surprised. When they drove away, I put my hand on the porch railing one last time and felt the grooves my fingers had worn, as if I had been carving my name with every winter. I rented a small apartment near a park with a pond that looks like it tries its best. The windows are honest. The laundry room is a basement that smells like old penny rolls. The first night, I put my chair against the wall because I like to have its back safe. I set the framed fair photo on the bookshelf, and the room breathed in a little. Eli came with Mark on Saturday. He ran straight to the chair and slid into it like he'd been born to sit exactly there. "It fits," he said solemnly. "So do you," I said. We walked to the pond with a bag of stale bread and fed the ducks who have terrible manners. Eli had a sheet of paper folded into a boat from an internet video he'd watched 5 times. He put it on the water and watched it begin to go under, and then right itself, and then go under again. And each time he didn't flinch. "It can't read either," he said, apropos of nothing, and I nearly laughed myself into the pond. On the way home, we passed a pop-up booth in the park, selling Polaroid photos like the old days. The young woman behind the camera had hair like a brave frosting. "Want one?" she asked. Eli looked at me for permission. I nodded. He stood under a maple and tilted his head just so, and the little moon under his ear lit itself without asking. The camera spat the card into her palm, and we watched the image hatch. When it dried, Eli blew on it. I slipped it into my sweater pocket next to the 78 photo, the way you carry two stones that feel similar in the hand, even if they're not the same. Back in the apartment, we ate grilled cheese like kings of a small country. Mark looked around at the room and nodded, as if seeing that my life could scale down without vanishing. "You okay, Mum?" he asked. "I'm good at small," I said. "Small is precise." He took that in. "I'm sorry," he said suddenly, and then, "For the way we—" He couldn't finish. "I know," I said. "We were all trying to make the math do the feeling." He made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You always liked your metaphors," he said. "They like me back," I said. We both smiled like people who had spent a great deal of time forgetting how. I kept my promises to myself and the ones I could keep to others. I volunteered at the library on Tuesday mornings, labeling boxes of old photos that had lost their names. I wrote in pencil what I could. Boy with fishing pole, 1954. Woman in hat, proud. Wedding cake leaning, bravery. I wasn't making a record so much as an argument with time. When Eli visited, we played a game where we named things other people had forgotten. He'd point at the uneven sidewalk slab outside my building and say, "Ms. Tilson tripped there in 1999. And I'd answer, "And her shoe flew off, and she laughed so hard she couldn't be embarrassed." We made the world a little sturdier with the parts nobody could prove. On a Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang with a number I knew, Tom. "He's here," he said. "Eli, do you want to, you know?" "I'll walk to the park," I said. My knees made their opinions known. I told them we were going anyway. They were on the bench by the pond. Eli sketched the ducks with fast, tender lines. Tom looked up and gave me the nod men give women when what they mean is, we are on the same road, even if we started from different towns. Eli held up his sketch. "This one is named Power of Attorney," he said gravely, pointing to the bossiest duck, and I almost choked. Tom had the grace not to look at me. "He's been listening," he said, apology in the laugh. "It's a good name for a duck," I said, tears I was not going to let go of pricking the corners of my eyes. "They're always taking over." We didn't say cousin or grandson or step. We watched the ducks decide everything for the whole pond, and we were content to be the people on the bench who understood that water is sometimes a family tree lying down. As the light slid off the pond and into the trees, Eli put his head against my sleeve. He didn't ask me to explain anything, which is how love is understood best.